Most businesses don't fail because they're badly run. They fail because one thing goes wrong and there's no room to recover. And when HMRC is involved, panic is what destroys most directors, not the actual debt. Now, I want to walk you through a real case involving a 25-year-old UK business. They employed 45 staff and they were days away from being wound up by HMRC. It wasn't a fly-by-night operation, it was a proper business. It had been trading for decades, it had paid fortunes in tax over the years. It were two directors who had built something that was real and had lasted a long time. And the biggest fear wasn't losing the company. They'd sort of accepted that. It was this question: how on earth are we going to pay redundancy for 45 people? And some of them have been with us decades. And that fear nearly pushed them into making the wrong move at exactly the wrong time. So you might be thinking, how does a strong business end up in trouble? Listen, they'd successfully traded for around 25 years, solid customer base, experienced workforce, good reputation. But like many manufacturing and actually order-led businesses, it relied very heavily on one large customer. And the problem was that order was delayed. And then it got delayed again. And then it got delayed again. And eventually, it got cancelled. And when that happens, cash flow doesn't wobble. Falls off an absolute cliff. And what followed was there was loads of stock tied up. The overheads were still really high. Fixed costs can't be cut straight away. Wages were still due at the end of the month. And obviously, in a blind panic, they stopped paying HMRC. And when HMRC becomes unpaid for long enough, the tone changes. And this business ended up facing a winding up petition from HMRC. Now that's when the directors came to us. They were in absolute panic mode. And I understood why. They were nice guys. They weren't asking, how do we save ourselves? You know, how do we get rid of all this debt and start again? They were asking, how on earth are we going to pay the redundancy for the people that have been with us for years and years? And a common misunderstanding is, you directors out there think that redundancy's got to be paid from the company. So they keep trading too long, they take on debt that's personally guaranteed, they make reckless decisions, and it's all to avoid making staff redundant. And yeah, ironically, you know, pushing on can cause you more problems. And the reality, and this is dead important for you, is in an insolvency, so liquidation, administration, statutory redundancy is paid by the government. It's through something called the Redundancy Payments Service, not by the directors personally. And this for your staff includes redundancy pay, arrears of pay, holiday pay that they've accrued and not taken, and even something called notice pay. And it changes everything if you act at the right time. So in this scenario, liquidation wasn't the first step. And the reason is because it had some value. You know, there were assets in the business to realise. And obviously an administration gave a better return to HMRC that was a major creditor than a liquidation. So just before HMRC issued the winding up petition, we stepped in. Now, the business got placed into administration. It's not a pre-pack administration, which is what I talk about a lot. There's no deal done behind closed doors. The administrators were appointed. The process was transparent. And what it achieved, this administration, is HMRC didn't issue a winding up petition. Staff could be made redundant properly. The RPS stepped in to support the employees. And the assets of the business were realised in an orderly way. And crucially, more money went back to HMRC in this scenario. And what happened to the staff is, well, this is what directors worry about most. Once in administration, staff were formally made redundant, claims were submitted to the RPS, employees received the redundancy pay, the wages they never got paid, holiday pay, and notice pay for in lieu of not being given the correct notice. And this system the government has is exactly for this situation. And because it was handled properly, staff were protected and they weren't abandoned. Now, the business had some plant, it had some machinery, it had equipment, it had some money owed in from customers. And nearly all the money was collected in by the administrators. And to the directors' credit, they actively helped. They actually assisted with debtor collection. And for that, they were actually paid a percentage by the insolvency practitioner. And they also helped with the assets, they helped match buyers with the assets, and they supported the process. Like the cooperation really made the difference. Now, the business assets were sold to an interested third-party buyer. It was an open and proper sale, but the directors knew buyers who would pay more than the market would. And this all generated funds to cover costs, to get a dividend back to creditors. Now, there were some personal guarantees in place from before we was approached. But what we was allowed them to do is to speak with the PGs, and they were basically renegotiated. They weren't enforced, drastically. And this is the difference between control and chaos. Listen, another good thing of a really bad situation was the directors, both of them were able to claim redundancy. Because they were employees of the business, they were on a decent amount of money every month via PAYE. I think both directors were around 15,000. So again, yeah, the support exists for directors, but only if you do it correctly. Now, the big lesson that I think here is if you do something properly, okay, you take the right advice at the right time. The minute you start getting worried, the minute that you realise you can't pay your suppliers on time, the minute that you realise you just keep increasing losses, that's the time that you pick the phone up. Have a plan for your personal guarantees. If they're going to be called upon once you go through an insolvency process, understand what that looks like. This administration doesn't make the directors failures. It's a cause of the market conditions. And what really saved them is they didn't panic. They didn't borrow more money, because they could have borrowed more money at the death that would have come with really aggressive lenders with PGs. They didn't continue to trade blindly. And at one point, they were going to try and remortgage the properties to fund redundancies. I'm like, well, you don't need to do that. They chose the right process at the right time. Now, this business didn't collapse because it were badly run. It collapsed because something outside of their control went wrong. But the outcome was still controlled. Staff got protected. They got what they were entitled to. HMRC got something back. The assets were realised properly. They didn't try and nick any assets or sell them to the mates. The director's conduct report hasn't brought any disqualification proceedings to them. The personal liability exposure could have been a lot more if they'd have took on more personally guaranteed debt, but it were managed. Now, if you're a UK director and you're facing HMRC pressure and your biggest fear is your staff, stop guessing. Get some advice. Give us a call. We'll explain how redundancy really works to staff, what support exists to you potentially, whether administration or liquidation's right, and how to protect yourself without making things worse. Because, listen, there's always a solution, but it's only if you act and you do it properly. Now, if you have found this video useful, I want you to go over there and I want you to watch another video about how we explain everything around redundancy, what they can claim, how much they can claim, what the process is. Go and watch that video over there. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.